Justin Timberlake is not in an enviable position for a pop star to be in right now. Sure, he's an established, successful artist with generation-defining hits, but he's also been raked over the coals ex post facto by both the media and the general public alike for his proximity and impact on both Britney Spears and Janet Jackson. To add insult to injury, his past two albums, Everything I Thought I Was and Man of the Woods, have been tepidly reviewed by critics and more or less ignored by everybody else. What happened? Justin Timberlake was one of the most prominent and beloved pop stars of the 2000s. Is this criticism unfairly justified, or was he simply able to skate by unscathed due to the misogyny-hungry culture of the 2000s? We all know that Justin Timberlake got his start in NSYNC as one of the two lead singers alongside JC of the boy group. NSYNC were juggernauts of the music industry, and still hold the number 2 and number 3 spot for the highest first week sales of an album in the USA. So Justin was perfectly primed for a breakout solo career, and his blue-eyed R&B debut album Justified became a smash hit, propelled by the single Cry Me a River, which cemented his status as a male sex symbol and solo star. Of course, Cry Me a River was famously written about Britney Spears, its lyrics showing Timberlake refusing to re-enter the relationship, claiming that the damage is done. Its video was far more explicit in its messaging, including a Britney lookalike that cheats on Timberlake's character. Britney has acknowledged that she was unfaithful to Timberlake during the course of their relationship, but also maintains that he was unfaithful to her during multiple instances. In interviews, Timberlake never explicitly said anything too disparaging, but heavily implied that Britney was the guilty party in regards to their breakup. He also claimed to have taken her virginity on a radio show, and made several shady comments throughout the years. In Britney's 2023 memoir, The Woman in Me, she describes how during her relationship with Timberlake, she became pregnant, and ultimately underwent a painful, both physically and emotionally, abortion. In the midst of Britney's conservatorship and her legal battle to free herself from it, the general public at large had begun re-examining Justin's behavior towards Britney during the early aughts, with public favor largely turning against him. The abortion revelation from Britney's book caused additional backlash, even though in Britney's retelling of events, Justin, though not perfect, did his best to be supportive of her during that period of her life. Britney largely stayed mum during the breakup and the aftermath, though she did release a single Every Time which details the pain she felt post-breakup with Timberlake. I think a lot of people now act like Timberlake's actions derailed Britney's career, or caused a massive influx of hate towards her, which I don't think is exactly true. I think if anything, both of their careers received a boost due to the relationship and subsequent breakup, at least in the tabloids. Now obviously I don't think Justin's actions towards Britney were great, and they certainly wouldn't fly as well as they did back in 2002 if it were today. But Justin and Britney were teenagers when they started their relationship, and they broke up when they were both like 21. I honestly don't think it's fair to completely crucify Justin for his actions back then. Somehow people tend to forget that Britney Spears had a husband who she had kids with and her own controversial demons and issues. After Justin Timberlake, that really escalated a lot of negative press. But Britney Spears famously isn't the only quote-unquote victim of Timberlake's. Perhaps his most infamous is Janet Jackson. As I'm sure all you know, during the 2004 Super Bowl halftime show, Timberlake removed part of Janet's costume, revealing her right breast on national television. According to Jackson, Timberlake was simply supposed to remove the top part of her bustier, revealing a red lacy bra, but the costume malfunctioned, revealing her breast. However, rumors that the whole ordeal had been a publicity stunt have never really stopped circulating. Unlike Britney, this actually had a far greater impact on Janet's overall career. Jackson was completely blacklisted from a variety of stations and networks, including CBS, MTV, VH1, and the Grammy Awards. America got incredibly puritanical about it, viewing the whole thing as a disgusting act on her part, forgetting that it was a joint effort and it was Timberlake who had removed her bra. Immediately following the incident, Justin Timberlake gave a PR-spun apology, just not to Janet Jackson herself. "I'm sorry if anyone was offended by the wardrobe malfunction during the halftime performance at the Super Bowl," Timberlake said. "It was not intentional and is regrettable." However, 2 years later in 2006, in a sit-down interview, Timberlake did acknowledge that the culture had been largely unfair to Janet. I'm a part of a community that considers themselves artists, and if there was something that I could have done in her defense that was more that I could have realized, then I would have, he said. But the other half of me thought to myself, wow, we still haven't found the weapons of mass destruction, and everybody cares about this. It's an understatement to say that it was sort of unfair if you consider it 50-50. I probably got 10% of the blame, he continued. And that says something about society, Timberlake said. I think that America's harsher on women, and I think that America's unfairly harsh on ethnic people. That same year, Janet revealed to Oprah that she harbored frustrations with Timberlake, stating that there are certain things you just don't do to friends, and that she hadn't returned calls to him, and that she'd do it in her own time when she felt ready. Of course, nowadays everybody can look back at Janet's treatment during the Super Bowl and see the situation for what it was, overblown, with an unfair amount of hostility placed on Janet Jackson. And while I think Timberlake definitely could have done more to defend Janet, it also seems that he wouldn't have been able to stand up and defend her entirely against the deluge of hostility and virulent misogyny present in culture at the time. It seems like Jackson would have suffered regardless, though of course, it's impossible to fully say. Of course, we can't forget Les Moonves, the former CEO of CBS. It was later revealed that he played an active role in blackballing Janet. Now take into consideration that at this point, Janet was being set up to ease into legacy artist territory like most of her peers, but she certainly could have gotten more hits during that time period, obviously not assuming that it would rival her prime work and commercial success. Famously, in the midst of Britney's legal battle against her conservatorship, the New York Times released a documentary that looked at the specifics of Britney's conservatorship, but also at the ways that she had been treated by the culture at large. Timberlake was more or less painted as a villain in the documentary, a revenge-driven ex who was able to escape accountability for his actions due to the misogyny present at the time, not giving the same amount of attention to her marriage to Kevin Federline, as well as her relationship with people like Sam Lutfi, and Britney's own trauma and decisions. In response, Timberlake issued a direct apology on his Instagram. Now obviously Timberlake was kind of forced to make this apology. Public opinion had turned against him so much, but the apology just kind of seemed super PR'd and focus grouped. I'm sure Timberlake did feel remorseful for his actions, but at the same time it does seem a bit like overkill. It doesn't matter if the public demanded an apology from Timberlake, they were never going to accept it at that point. It should be noted that as of 2020, Janet Jackson has more or less forgiven Justin, saying Justin and I are very good friends and we will always be very good friends. She continued, "We spoke just a few days ago. He and I have moved on and it's time for everyone else to do the same." What many people don't know is that it was rumored that Janet and Justin were dating back then, which makes their steamy performance make so much more sense. Janet also revealed that she was the one that told Justin to keep quiet about the halftime aftermath. Personally, I do think the incident was a publicity stunt that backfired and went wrong, and that still tends to be the general consensus. Even revealing the lace under the bra, which was supposedly the original plan, was a very risky move to pull on the most watched family event in America. It's not like this was the VMAs where spectacle and sexiness was expected. It is an event for families, so even if it was meant to show a red lace underneath, it was going to receive complaints and backlash. But I think most people agree that Janet didn't deserve to be shut out and shunned, especially for the amount of time that she was. And due to the Super Bowl incident, people used the sexy covers and photo shoots that she did afterwards against her. The Super Bowl incident has become a super point of focus online. And while I think it's fair to acknowledge what happened and how relatively tame it seems compared to today's standards, Janet Jackson is more than the Super Bowl incident that stalled her mid-2000s career. Her legacy and what she has accomplished shouldn't be regulated to the effects of the Super Bowl incident. She's contributed and done much more fabulous and noteworthy things in her career. Now, despite Justin's public apology in February of 2024, Timberlake, while in concert, told the New York audience that he'd like to take the opportunity to apologize to absolutely fucking nobody before performing his 2013 hit Holy Grail.
I'd like to take this opportunity to apologize to absolutely nobody.
The declaration came a couple days after Britney Spears uploaded an Instagram post seemingly clarifying her relationship with Justin. "I want to apologize for some of the things I wrote about in my book. If I offended any of the people I genuinely care about, I am deeply sorry," Spears wrote. I also wanted to say I am in love with Justin Timberlake's new song Selfish. It is so good. And how come every time I see Justin and Jimmy together, I laugh so hard? P.S. Sanctified is wow too, she said. However, following this declaration, Britney uploaded a new post saying someone told me someone was talking shit about me on the streets. Do you want to bring it to court, or will you go home crying to your mom like you did last time? I'm not sorry. Now, I'm not sure that Justin's declaration was necessarily an act of war or whatever. Sometimes you're just putting on a show. And in a way, I get where he's coming from. I do think Justin has been unfairly blamed for some things. Yes, he's behaved like an asshole, but in reality, Britney and Janet would have been crucified by a woman-hating culture at large, with or without Justin. Of course, Justin's actions helped escalate some things though. He is in no way innocent, but I do feel like people are trying to overcompensate for how Janet and Britney were treated by taking it out on Justin. And at the end of the day, that just doesn't help Britney or Janet in any way. Which leads us to present day, and the standing of Justin Timberlake as an artist, removed from all of his controversies. Justin Timberlake, for the better part of his career, has been one of pop's official mainstays. Not exactly the most consistent, but when he decided to release, he was always met with welcoming ears, eager to hear his boyish sanitized take on the glory years of Prince and Michael Jackson. He created some of the most recognizable hits of the 2000s and 2010s decade, and for mainstream pop, he was always considered pretty forward-thinking, or at least distinctive, thanks to the ear-buzzing production of producers such as Timberlake and Pharrell. Timberlake offered relatively simplistic melodies and lyrics, delivered on at best musically adventurous productions that showed he could be forward-thinking, and at worst, safe but effective productions. Timberlake is now at the stage of his career where he's losing grip or has already lost grip and the tiny bit of edge and coolness he once had. A large part of that is him transitioning into legacy act territory. Take his constant reunions with NSYNC, which was surely done for PR damage and to nostalgia bait people who grew up with them. But for the longest, JT had been solo career oriented. It was made known that he no longer needed them, and for the first time in forever, it finally felt like he did. But chopping everything up to being a legacy act would be too easy, and would ignore his middling and, for lack of better words, boring output. Some of his peers, like Beyonce for example, who he has collaborated with and written for, are still making well put together and received bodies of works that even manage to shed new light and stylistic changes, which shows that if you still have the pulse for thrilling music, it's not out of reach. Timberlake, on the other hand, has resulted into making music that sounds like pop's wallpaper band Maroon 5, a far cry from his sexy back days. Perhaps Timberlake felt the need to make his music as generic as possible with his recent album Everything I Thought It Was, so he could get back in the good graces of public opinion, while not tainting the markability of his music. Unfortunately, it's just another miss for Justin Timberlake, who seems to have significantly lost his artistic pulse with 2 back-to-back misfires in his discography.